Aloha! Thank you for joining us today for the 12th episode of Nima Voices, a virtual interview series. My name is Shari Tamashiro. I'm a cybrarian at Kapiolani Community College. I've been a fan of Discover Nikkei since it was in its development stages. Deepest respect to the team who've been growing this site for almost 20 years. Before we start the program, I'd like to briefly introduce the Discover Nikkei project and the Nima Voices series. Discover Nikkei is the Japanese American National Museum's international community-based web project with major funding from the Nippon Foundation, launched in 2005. The site is in 4 languages, English, Japanese, Spanish, and Portuguese, and shares unique Nikkei stories from around the world, from throughout the United States, Brazil, Japan, Peru, Canada, Argentina, Mexico, and other countries around the world. New stories are published daily on the website. Nima are members of the Discover Nikkei online community. Hailing from all over the world, they each bring unique experiences and perspectives to the site's rich archive of stories. Nima Voices is an interview series where we uplift our Nima through brief but enlightening interviews. In this 12th episode, I will be talking with Kristen Nemoto Jay, editor of the Hawaii Herald, which publishes twice a month and provides coverage of the Japanese American community in Hawaii. Discover Nikkei has been republishing some of Kristen's articles from the Herald on its website since March 2022. They have also been publishing stories written by other writers in the Herald since 2008. We will be chatting with Kristen about her family and background, the Herald, and more. After my conversation with Kristen, I will ask her some of your questions. So use the chat feature to ask questions at any time, and I'll try to get to a few of them at the end of the conversation. You will need to be logged in to use the chat feature. We're also going to be sharing links to the articles we mentioned in the chat and in the video description afterwards. So, aloha, Kristen. Mahalo for sharing your time with us today.
Aloha.
So, kind of curious, can you talk story a little bit about your family background?
Yes, so thank you so much for that introduction. Yeah, so I'm a 4th generation Yonsei. I was born and raised here in Oahu on the Windward side, which is the east side of Oahu in Kailua and Waimanalo. I went to Kailua High School, moved away, went to Chapman University for college. And yeah, my roots grow really deep here on the islands. And
so in Hawaii, like that's the first question people ask: what high school you went? Because they want to know, are you public or are you private?
High school all the way.
Me too. Yeah. But your family roots are where?
Yeah, so I have Okinawa and Japanese roots. Yeah, and also I'm a mixed plate. My grandfather, who was a 442nd Regimental Combat Team soldier and veteran, he was part Norwegian and Hawaiian. So I'm Okinawan, Japanese, Hawaiian, Norwegian is what I usually tell people when they ask what I am.
So you're Hapa.
Hapa, yeah, what we call here in the islands. So yeah.
So when you were growing up, were you and your family involved in local Nikkei community organizations?
No, so I have flashbacks of parts of my heritage, and it was at my grandma's old church over at 7-Eleven when we're I forget the name exactly, but it was in Kailua, and I remember falling asleep in the pews, laying down on my grandma's lap, and that's like one of the only glimpses I remember of going to Buddhist church with her, and then also going to Buddhist funerals. Mainly our family, we're so mixed plate with our ethnicities. We grew up just as a local culture in general, but nothing really deeply embedded in my roots as far as my Japanese heritage. Yeah.
So your grandfather, Wilbert Sanderson Holk, was in the 100th 442nd Regimental Combat Team in Canning Company, and he helped to liberate the town of Bruyeres in France, and he returned to Bruyeres in the 1950s, and he forged a lifelong friendship with the people in town and was instrumental in helping set up a sister city relationship between Bruyeres and Honolulu.
Mhm.
And, so when you were 29, you were able to actually go visit Bruyeres and kind of walk in his footsteps, right? So can you tell us about that experience and the impact it had on you?
Yes. So it was just an amazing experience. Yeah, so that's my grandpa. He was shaking the hands of Mayor Drahon was his name. He was the mayor. That's in 1957, and he came back to, take a look around in the town, and they found out that a Nisei veteran was there, and so they really wanted to meet him. And he had a very charismatic way with people, and he was into politics. He was also a city councilman during that time, I believe, and so he was very interested in trying to create relationships with people, and so that's how he got the sister city relationship. But yeah, so in terms of my visit, I went in 2013. I was 29, and I honestly went not to learn so much about my grandfather's history. Unfortunately, I was more swayed to go because of, the lavish dinners I heard that we would be partaking in, and, the endless amounts of wine. And, who wouldn't want to see Europe and France? I had studied abroad in Italy in college prior, but, being there again, I couldn't say no. So I went with my family, and this was for the 69th anniversary of the liberation of the town, and I was just blown away by the hospitality, the amazing relationship that Honolulu and Bruyeres still have to this day, and how appreciative the townspeople are. They had American flags in the windows of the shops, and people were giving us shaka as we walked by, because we stood out like sore thumbs, right, in that town. And they celebrate it once a year, but then when they see um, people that don't quite look like them around that time of year, they kind of know that we're related to that event. And I met people who didn't speak any English. I don't speak French, but we somehow communicated of how I get emotional just thinking about it, because I you meet some of these people, and there's just tears in their eyes, and they're middle aged now, and some of them have passed, and they would express such gratitude of how they had to hide in the basements of their houses because there were bombs going off outside, and they didn't know if they were going to live or die. And so um, it was just a moving experience that I'll never forget. I'll never forget. Yeah, and I hope
So
to go
your
back one day.
grandfather lied about his age to volunteer, and he was only 17, I think, when
Yeah,
he wore.
yeah, he was only 17 at the time, because he wanted to to help and be a part of the war, and to show his loyalty to a country that was unfortunately um, not to him, as well as so many other of the men. But they believed in the country, and what it would stand for, not only for themselves but for generations to come, which includes mine. And so, yeah.
But I think you going over there and, being where he fought and talking to the people that, were so impacted by what your grandfather and the rest of the 100th 442 fought to protect. That must have been an
Oh,
amazing experience.
oh, it was so amazing. There was a part where they have the one of the ceremony. There's a lot of different official ceremonies that go on, but there was one in particular where we were in the Vosges Mountains, which many of who know the history of the 100th and the 442nd, many soldiers
That's
have
the
lost their
Rescue
lives
Beloved
there.
Battalion, yeah.
Yes, and they had the our American flag hanging, and also the Hawaiian flag, and they played the national anthem and Hawaii Pono'i. And when I was there, it was a light drizzle of rain that you can't make this stuff up, that came down, and then the clouds parted for just a little bit and the sun came down even through the thick forest, and it was just, there was not a dry eye there. And I will forever remember that.
It sounds magical.
It was, yes, yes.
I think for Nikkei, who are third, fourth generation and down, there's not always a strong connection, to the culture and heritage. Kind of like you were saying when you were growing up, you weren't that. I mean, your memory is just of maybe the temple, right? But at some point, there's something that usually triggers an interest and connection. And, is that visit to Bruyeres, walking in your grandfather's footsteps, is that what started you on the path of connecting to your heritage, you think?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Prior to that, and so I wasn't close with my grandfather. He had divorced my grandmother before I was born, years before I was born, and he had moved to Arizona and started his own life, another life, with another family. And I would get snippets of information about him and about his time in the war, but nothing really concrete as to who he was as a person. And so I just was like, okay, I didn't really bother to ask anymore. And plus, they didn't want to share, the men, and our grandfathers, they don't like to share those types of things. And so when I actually was there to see what he had to endure and what he did for so many people, not even a question, to put his life on the line, it really transformed how I looked at my lineage and my past as so much a part of who I am, and what I could use that to help moving forward, in telling people stories. So it was really monumental for me to be there.
And so you decided that you were going to be a writer, and you ended up going into journalism. How did you make that move?
Yeah. So I and Shari, you and I were talking about this prior. So I went through a quarter life crisis.
I've never heard of quarter life crisis, by the way.
Yeah, when you turn 25, it's like a monumental thing where you are like, what am I going to do with my life? And so I had that when I would turn 25, and rightfully so, because I had graduated college a while back. When I was 22 is when I graduated, with my degree in sociology, not knowing what I would do with it. And I was going through job after job of just random, like, salesperson, or I worked for the Capitol for 2 weeks too long, for a little bit, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I finally sat myself down and I said, well, what would you like to do for the rest of your life, and you think you'd be happy and you're good at, and I thought of writing. And so writing was something that I just honed in on, and I said, okay. So I made the decision, and I just decided, I would love to tell stories, and journalism would be my passion and pursue. So that's when I decided to go to grad school, applied, and I went to DePaul University for a bit, and then graduated, and then moved home.
So what brought you home?
I don't know. There was a lot more job opportunities. I was dating a local boy who is my husband now, but we had only been dating for a year, and so we weren't too serious. So I told myself, if things work out here in Chicago, I think I should stay here. But just like when I graduated from Chapman, something always pulled me back home, and I didn't know what it was. And now, being in the position that I'm in now, working for the Hawaii Herald, I could not have asked for a better place to be. This is my home, and I love sharing stories about the people who surround my community. I always thought that I needed to go away to tell those types of stories, but in reality, there's stories all around us, and what better way to share those stories than what means the most to me, and that is my community. So, yeah.
In 2017, you began as a freelance writer for the Herald, and then you eventually joined the staff, and now you are the editor. Actually, if it's not rude to ask, how old are you? old were you
Oh,
when
I
you?
don't mind telling my age. I stopped caring. I'm gonna be 39 in November.
So under 40, and you are the editor of one of the oldest publications on the
Yes.
island.
Yes. Yes.
This is totally aside, but Japanese journalists, they have to publish the age of the person, whoever they interview, and they're so terrified to ask American women who they are and share. So I was like, oh, should I ask? I'm gonna ask. But
No, yeah, I don't
how
mind.
did it come about, that you became the editor, and what is it like to join a publication whose roots trace back to the early 1900s?
Oh, yeah. It's so to answer your first question, I was I was a freelance writer and staff writer. Prior to freelance writer, I was an editor for a travel magazine company for nearly 5 years. But I left because it became too much on my plate, but also pulling away from what I thought I wanted to do in terms of writing, the people I'm writing about. So I met Carlene Chinend, who is the former editor of the Hawaii Herald at the Nisei Veterans Legacy Joint Memorial Service. I was the mistress of ceremonies, and she was there, and I was introduced to her, and the stars aligned, and so I got to write for her, and then became staff writer soon after the pandemic, which worked well for me at that time because I had just given birth and we worked from home primarily. And then when Jody Ching, the former editor after Carlene had left, she said, I know you can do it. And it was only a year that no, less than a year of me being staff writer that I became editor. So
I have to say, 3 Okinawan women editors in a row is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's so cool. That is really cool. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, when I took the helms, I still email and call Jody guys all the time. So I don't know if I'm still like the rightful editor right now because I still stand on their shoulders very much when it comes to the work that I do. But and then to answer your next question about being a part of a publication that's been around since 1912 is just, it brings me so much joy and despair at the same time, if that makes sense. Joy meaning it's just so amazing how, looking back at the history of Japanese Americans here, especially in Hawaii, and women in particular, and to be able to do what I do is just so unbelievably moving to me. And despair, maybe not despair, I'm a little dramatic, because I'm very fearful for a lot of things because I know the responsibility, and like I said, the shoulders in which I stand on. I am who I am because of you, Okage Samade. And it is a huge responsibility, and I am just one person. But I understand the brevity of the importance of this job and work, if I could ever call it a job. It's more of a passion for me. So it's incredibly moving, and I'm very honored to be here.
But I think, you mentioned being alone, but you've got Jody, you've got Carlene, guiding your way and supporting you, and you've got a community
Mhm.
that's in place to support. So I hope you don't look at it as being alone because you have so much support.
Thank you. Thank you. I do, yes, constantly. And I have yeah, Jody and Carlene on speed dial to prove that for sure.
So, we had been talking about heading up a publication that has its roots, from 1912. And you had a kind of neat story about when it kind of hit you about what it meant when you went to your intern's presentation ceremony at high school.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you. So I had just taken over as editor, and we have had an intern that worked with us, and she had her graduation ceremony for her internship that I had to go to because I was the new editor, and this was at Castle High School, and she did her presentation and talked about how much she loved working for us, and it was so great to see her perspective of what it was like, you know, being part of our team. And then afterwards, I'd gone and up to her and I said, "Oh, you did such a great job." And she came up to me and she gave me a lei and a little gift. And her grandparents were there too, as well as her mom. And her grandparents said, "Oh, they wanted to meet me." I was like, "Oh, okay." And so I shook their hand, and they said, "Oh, take a picture, take a picture." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I felt so bad the entire time because I felt like it was like my graduation ceremony, because I didn't give her a lei. I didn't even think of that. I'm not good like that. But they took a picture with me, and they shook my hand. They said, "You know, it's really important what you're doing and what you're carrying on, and it's really a pleasure to meet you." And I wanted to tell them, "Oh, you know, you mean I think they thought I was Jody or, you know, Carlene." And but they said, "No, you know, you're the editor." And it's we've been reading the Herald for many years, and we really want to tell you that you know, you're a part of a great organization and a great group. So thank you for what you're doing. And I was just so moved. And I went home and I remember talking to my parents about it. And, you know, they reassured me, and they told me about, you know, where I am and the place that I hold. And I didn't know, I really didn't. And I got to know a little bit more about being the editor as a really, it's upheld to its highest for a lot of people, a lot of locals here in Hawaii. And so I took that to heart for sure. Yeah.
So for those who don't know, what is the history of the Herald?
Yeah, so it was founded by Fred Kinza Buro Makino, and back in 1912. So originally it was called the Hawaii Hochi. Well, there is the Hawaii Hochi is our overall umbrella company. And so he founded the newspaper. He was from Yokohama, Japan, and he was part English and Japanese. His father is English, his mother's Japanese. And he moved to Oahu to help his brother with a business. And because he had both, he was bilingual and he had a law background, he helped a lot of the Japanese plantation workers that were there, who didn't know anything about their rights. And he helped unionize them together and help act as their lawyer, pretty much, of what they were due. And he was instrumental in the plantation era of the workers and helping them to unionize together. And so through that, he created the Hawaii Hochi. And so the Hawaii Hochi was a newspaper that it was in Japanese, and it just shared all the information that the plantation workers and immigrants from Japan can learn more about living in Hawaii during that time. And when Pearl Harbor was bombed, he had to change the name because of all the scrutiny that the Japanese were facing at that time. He changed the name to the Hawaii Herald for a brief period of time, just to help skew the discrimination. And then it changed back to the Hawaii Hochi back in the 1950s, I believe. And then in 1980 is when the Hawaii Herald, which is what we do now, the English writing newspaper, was created as a way to help bridge the gap between the older generation of Japanese and new generation as well.
So can you talk about the challenges the Hawaii Herald is facing today?
Yes, well, The number one challenge is I would go to events since COVID is, it's opening up things more. People come up to me and they're like, "Oh, are you still around?" So I have to like reassure people that the Hawaii Herald's are around, or I'll, get people who have no idea who we are, which is, understandably. And so I have to kind of reintroduce, I feel like, our newspaper to a lot of people, and especially our younger generations. Um, and also get people to want to learn more about their heritage, which I found is in quite interest, especially with my generation, the Yonsei and Gosei generations as well. Um, it's just a matter of helping get the exposure out that we're having a little bit of trouble with, but we're working hard on it for
I
sure.
think like all publications around the world, um, it's subscriptions are probably down. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So our subscriptions are fairly down from a lot. And like when we first started in the 1980s to 90s, it was up to 10,000 subscribers. Now we're a couple thousand. We're at a steady pace right now, which is considerably good. And um, Instagram and Facebook has really helped us with our younger readers and create more interest. So we're hoping to continue in that light too.
So, what is your vision for the Herald under your leadership?
My vision is to continue to help share stories in which otherwise would not have been told. I really want to uphold what Mr. Makino wanted to continue to do, and that is help be that voice for those, open up conversations. We had our very first Pride issue last year, and which we're hoping to share more LGBTQ plus community stories, in which, especially within our Asian American community, has been not barely talked about. So we want to help to move those conversations forward, and we actually have a columnist now, two columnists that help share about LGBTQ plus community stories, and they're also Yonsei generation writing the articles. Right, actually, one of them is right there. That's Cameron with the glasses. And he was part of our feature story in our October issue. So that's Cameron Miyamoto. He's the director for the LGBTQ plus center at UH Manoa. So he's one of the columnists that writes for us. So
I'm really struck by you saying that you want to help the older generations maybe broach subjects like this with the younger generation, or to help younger generations understand the older generation mindset and culture, or connect them to a culture that maybe they're not they don't know how to dive into, right?
mhm, mhm. Yes, exactly. No, yeah. I think it really has to do with knowing, trying to get the conversation started. I think both sides don't really know how to, no matter what, race or, background you come from. I feel like when it comes to subjects that aren't necessarily talked about a lot, it's hard to find a way to wiggle that in. So I think what the Herald is hoping to do is create those talking points. Um, Also share experiences of those that have experience, with, and also give a voice to that person, because a lot of the readers, I had a couple readers that called me when the Pride issue came out, and they said, they don't know a single gay or lesbian person, and reading the stories that we had was really eye-opening for them to be more accepting, and just understanding that we all, no matter who you are, we all have stories to share, and we all want to be loved, and we want to be understood. And so that was really touching for me to hear when the issue came out. So yeah, that's what we're hoping to do.
And I think as Japanese Americans, knowing what happened in World War II, where people were judged by affiliation, not by action, and had their rights taken away. I always feel like it's on us to make sure that we fight for other people's civil rights, that we make sure that what happened to, those people doesn't happen again without us speaking up. And I can see you playing a really important role in that and doing that.
Oh, thank you. No, if anything, I'm just so grateful to the people who are willing to share their stories with us, to be vulnerable and to open up. It's not easy, right, to share those feelings and how it meant to grow up feeling alone, and who wants to share those types of things. But it's important to them because they want others to know that they're not alone, and that they have a community, and that does reside here with the Hawaii Herald. So yeah, I'm just grateful.
Kristen, there's a question. Would you have any advice or anything to say, like advice, encouragement, to a pre-quarter life crisis person with a background similar to yours?
Pre-quarter life, what's that? Advice. I've never been asked that. Thank you. I guess do any job that you think you could get your hands on that you think has a remote chance of something that you want to do. Had I not been a salesperson, I wouldn't have realized I'm not meant to be a salesperson or a buyer for Nordstrom in particular. Had I not been a waitress, I don't think I would have realized that I'm not meant for the food and beverage industry. Had I not been a tutor or a substitute teacher, I wouldn't have known that that realm was not necessarily for. I love tutoring. That was actually what I did prior to writing, but it wasn't a stickler career that I could stick with. But I'd say, if anything, do as much as you can while you have time. While you're young, yeah, because you have the time to figure that stuff out. And if you don't, you don't. I didn't find this job for of where I wanted to be until I was 35, and even then, who knows where your life will take you. Just being open to learn, I think, is the key. Yeah.
So, I want to make the point that the Hawaii Herald's not limited to just Hawaii. I think the stories that the Herald writes is of interest to Nikkei readers from around the world. And, people can do a digital subscription. They don't have to get a hard copy mailed to them.
Yes.
And, I think it's hard for you to say it. But I think that, like with restaurants, if we in the community don't go regularly to eat at a restaurant and it closes, that's on us. We're saying it's not worth it to have Okinawan dishes or Japanese dishes in a thing. In the same way, if we're not getting a subscription to the Herald or, maintaining it, then if it shuts down, that's on us, because we're saying it's not worth it. It's not worth our time and our money to support an organization that tells our stories. And I think awkward for you to say that, so I can say it. But I do want people to think about that, which is that, is this publication important enough that we will, make the effort to buy that subscription and support it so that it can survive another 100 years, because it is telling our stories, and there isn't a lot of places telling our stories, not in the way that you are. And, even like your latest issue had about the origin of all the cherry blossoms all over Hawaii. I think that's a fascinating story that would be of interest to pretty much anyone, right?
Yes.
So they have rapid fire questions that I'm going to ask you. So this is a part of every Nima voice. So who is your Nikkei hero?
My grandmother.
Sorry.
after she and my grandfather divorced, she was a homemaker of 6 kids. And when they divorced, she was in her 50s and had to start all over again, go back into the workforce. And which she did. She worked for the military for the next 15, 20 years after that. And we still gather at her house and created this whole big family in which we surround her. So yeah, she's my hero for sure.
What's your favorite Japanese Nikkei food?
Oh yeah, so I told you natto earlier, but I think spam musubi might be a better thing because it's like Japanese influence, but it's not from Japan, right? It's from Hawaii. And oh my gosh, I love my mom's spam musubi. She makes it perfectly sweet and not too salty and not too glazed. It's just right, yeah.
What is the Japanese value that has most influenced you?
I'd say perseverance, so ganam, or okage-sama day would have to be.
And what do you like the most about Discover Nikkei?
I love the conglomerate of stories, and also it coming in so many different languages for so many different eyes to and ears to be able to hear and listen to all the stories that are out there, so rich in history and the ability for us to always learn. I love that.
So Keiko Nakahodo from Osaka, Japan. Hi, Keiko-san. Wants to know if you experienced any difficulty in your career because you are female. In Japanese society, industry of the news media is still dominated by men.
So when I became editor, there was a little bit of pushback for some of the stories that that we published, and so I'll just be transparent. It was the Pride issue that came out, and I received quite a lot of phone calls in which were from men who talked to me like how my father talks to me when I was, 12. Just little instances like that. But it's all about how you react. Yeah. And it's about how you perceive the situation to your advantage. As long as I can just know who I am and know that, I'm not going to please everyone in general when it comes to the stories that we put out, most of which is just sharing the truth and people's own stories. So it's not something that I will ever regret doing. And also just knowing that, you're not going to please everyone, so that's okay. But for those that do get to read it and accept it, makes it all the worthwhile. So those are just the little instances, but you just brush them off. That's fine.
Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share?
I'm just so very grateful. I've said it a lot, but it's just that is the truth. I'm very grateful to be here with you, Shari, and to be a part of this community. I'm just so very humbled to be able to continue on with this publication, and I only hope to continue. And thank you all so very much for welcoming this paper and all the stories that we have to share with you all.
So thank you so much, Mahalo, for sharing your time and your thoughts with us today. For everyone else, please save the date to join Discover Nikkei for the next Nima Voices episode on June 20th. Guest host Mia Barnett, co-chair of Okairi, a Nikkei LGBTQ plus community group, will chat with Alden Hayashi, a Sansei writer originally from Hawaii, now living in Boston, about his family history, why he decided to shift from writing about science, technology, and business to writing fiction to preserve stories of the Nikkei experience, his first novel, and his sense of identity as a gay Nikkei man. Discover Nikkei is also partnering once again with the Little Tokyo Historical Society on their 10th Imagine Little Tokyo short story contest. The winning stories will be presented at the celebration event on May 20th, so check their website for details. And finally, Discover Nikkei would love, absolutely love to hear from you. Contact them at editor@discovernikkei.org with your feedback and suggestions for future episodes and programs. So thank you so much for spending time with us. And Kristen, I have to tell you, gambate and chibario, you've got us, we've got your back too.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Shari. Aloha. Take care. Thank you.